Welcome in, everybody. We're going to get started in just about a minute. So get comfortable, get relaxed. Happy Friday, and we'll get started in just about a minute. All right, Joe, take it away.
Okay. Hey, good morning, everybody. This is going to be our second webinar for our program. And there's so many topics that we could cover, and we're going to try to hit as many as we can. But we're also going to try to hit relevant ones, relevant to you today with regard to cyber and your clients. And before we get started, I just want to tell you a few things about the ComTech Leavitt program and really how it's going since we kicked off this program with Wingman. So, hey, we've already had over 70 submissions, and we're hitting at a little over 20% hit ratio. So that's exciting news. I think that number is going to continue to go up. We just need to get more information out there, get people comfortable with what we're doing, help you guys sell the cyber, which that will be our next webinar coming up at the end of the month. We're going to go through that, but everything's going on track. We're getting things done for you. And I wanted to mention just a second. I'm going to share my screen with everybody. And a lot of times we get a lot of questions about various things as far as products and help with. Let's see here. Why didn't my screen pull up? Okay, well, I'm not going to do that then. But what we do have is we have a lot of marketing materials for you that have already been branded. A lot of them are available right on our website. We also have a bundle of other ones. So if you ever have any question about comparisons to other programs, a comparison that you can use, any of those marketing materials, we've branded those completely neutral as Leavitt. So feel free to call me or call Jenny and say, hey, I'd like something on ransomware. We will get you some information on that you can discuss that with your client. So we have all those tools available. We also have the something that I just found out, which is pretty exciting, through Access, which is the program that this written through. You have full access to all their library of videos and training, everything with regard to the cyber world. So if you're looking for anything, anytime, they're going to have some stuff for you on there as well. So a lot of preventative as far as making sure you're getting trained, who's getting trained, all that sort of thing. That's all free to you on that website. So with that said, we have back Ellie Feldman and Maddie I'm sorry, it's a little tongue freeze here early in the morning. But they're going to go over two really key, I call them underwriting points that are going on right now that we're getting a lot of questions on. These are things that you need to be aware of, understand them so you can better discuss them with your client. So with that said, I am going to turn it over to Ellie and Maddie, and we'll go through what's the latest.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Joe. My name's Maddie, and Ellie's also here as well. And today we'll be talking about navigating the new requirements, what you should know about backups and multi-factor authentication. As a reminder, there is a chat system and a Q&A on here. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to place them in there and we will answer them live. So today's objectives, we're going to talk about what MFA and backups are, why these security measures are important. We'll touch on how to implement these procedures, some other notable security measures, and then we'll do a little question and answer session at the end. So Ellie, kick it off for us. What is multi-factor authentication?
Well, first, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us, Joe. We always really appreciate these training sessions. So let's just kick it off with a bang. We went in the cyber industry from having insurance policies be written with little to no questions being asked, little to no information being required, to all of a sudden there are these requirements that every business must have cybersecurity best practices in place in order to even get coverage. And it threw everybody in the industry for a loop because it happened fast, which, as we all on this call know, is a rarity in our industry. Fast is not a word that anybody would use to describe the insurance industry. And so we want to take some time to help you guys talk through what some of these new requirements are and really get a feel and understanding for how to talk to your customer about this. Now, my caveat, we are means at the end of this going to make you experts in these things. But what I think we'll be able to do is help you be able to sit with your customer and fill out the applications together, or answer questions, or even just field questions from your insurance that might pop through this new process of getting cyber insurance. And the first and most important is multi-factor authentication. Now, you've probably seen this before and didn't know what it was called. Sometimes it's referred to as two-factor authentication, sometimes multi-factor, but here's the gist of it. A username and password alone are no longer sufficient to keep something secure. Because your username and password have probably appeared out in the ether in multiple data breaches at this point, just using a username and password to keep something secure doesn't really work. And so the technology industry came up with a way to verify or authenticate that you are the person that's trying to log in as you. And the way that they do this is either by a phone call, a text message, email, or a code on your phone in an application that gives you a code number that you then enter. And they have that secondary way to make sure that it's you, that phone number, that text message, that whatever. They can then make sure that that number fits their number, and they know that it's you entering in that information. This is most frequently used in several situations. I'm sure most of you deal with something like this to log into your online banking, for example. They've been doing this for quite some time. But really, anywhere that you use a username and password, you should also have this multi-factor authentication. There are some nuances, though, and we can get into those. But really, any critical data or anywhere that you need a username and password, you should also have this secondary double check to make sure that it's you.
Awesome. So Ellie, you did a great job of summarizing what MFA is. Now tell us why our insureds need multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, so we already know that a username and password isn't good enough anymore. But we have all of our critical data, whether it be through email or backup drives or your agency management system that you use a login for. And Microsoft did a study and found that of the accounts that were breached or compromised in some way, 99.9% of them did not have multi-factor authentication turned on. MFA is so good at preventing breaches from happening that it is now an industry standard. And this is all, again, happening really quickly. But to say that this one small thing can make a tremendous difference in the actual chance of a cyber breach is not an overstatement. It's a small thing that makes a very big difference. It's really unbelievable.
Okay, so that's why it's important. Now, how does it work?
Yeah, so you're going to see it in several different ways. And this is really one of the more important things that we're going to talk about today. Typically speaking, we're going to log into an admin panel, anyone who's an administrator on any set of accounts, whether it be your Microsoft 365 or your Vertafore or your Applied or whatever it might be, and go over to the security settings and enable multi-factor authentication for all users. And then, and here's the kicker, when you go to set up a new device or to use a service on a new browser, it will then ask you to enter your username and password as usual. And that will be followed by this secondary double check of your identity, meaning you'll have to fill in the code from either an app on your phone, a text message, an email, a phone call, whatever. And that way it's double checking that it's you. Now, how does this work? Here's the imagine that you use the same username and password for your agency management system and your email. And those credentials get leaked because of a data breach of some kind. When you have MFA turned on, they will, if someone goes in and enters your username and email, even if they have that information, it will not let them in unless they have that code. But it's texting you personally, or you have the app that's telling you someone's trying to get in. Not only does it not let them in, but it notifies you that those credentials are now unsecure and must be changed. And so it's a double whammy for against bad actors. It keeps them out and it notifies you that those credentials have been leaked somewhere. And so you can update them to something different, which doubly makes you more secure. Are there any questions on sort of how MFA functions and why it's so good at keeping out bad actors? There's going to be lots of questions here today. Please don't hesitate to toss them into the chat or the Q&A. We really do want to hear them. We hear a lot of account specific examples of, well, do you need MFA for this? And we'll get into that a little bit, but make sure you ask all of your questions because we're here to answer them.
All right, Ellie. A lot of agents have come to me and asked, well, you know, my insured has a VPN or a remote desktop protocol. Do they really need multi-factor authentication on top of that? Isn't that secure enough?
Yeah, great question. The answer is no, it's not secure enough, and we'll talk about why. I've been doing this webinar for a couple of weeks now, and the best example I can come up with is imagine that you've just built a house and it has no windows, no doors, and it's completely secure. That is the idea of having just sort of a computer not connected to the internet and all of your data is on it. And every time there's a different connection point from that computer to the outside world, you're adding a window, you're adding a door, you're adding, et cetera, anything else. And that includes using third-party service providers to house your data or your backups or whatever. And so the kicker is every time there's a window or a door, you have to turn on MFA to keep the bad actors out. That's essentially like boarding up that window or door. So let's look at three very specific examples. A VPN, you know, a virtual private network can be used in a lot of different ways. It can mask where you know, sort of where you are in the world when you're trying to access something. And that's good security, but is it keeping out bad actors? No. Remote desktop protocol is probably the biggest culprit of problematic cyber tools because companies like Citrix, most people who use RDP are using a company like Citrix, and they have credentials to log in. And if they don't have multi-factor authentication turned on, that is a way those same username and passwords that we've already talked about are definitely out there somewhere, can not just get into your desktop, but can get into the whole system. And that is terrible. And so there's nothing more important than RDP for multi-factor authentication. Even if you use a VPN or encryption on your RDP, they absolutely have to have multi-factor authentication because that's like it's blowing the roof off of the building. Anybody could come in. So in that instance in particular, if you have a customer who says like, well, we use Citrix to access our computers, that's not a positive. Citrix absolutely has multi-factor authentication ability for its RDP, and absolutely it should be turned on, because if somebody's trying to get into the house, you need to know about it because an RDP will really let them do anything. Third-party data is the same. I mean, we just sort of talked about it with regards to your agency management system. For your customers, though, it could be electronic medical records. Maddie and I were on the phone with an insured last week about they have like an energy portal thing that they use a third party for. Anything where you house customer data or where you house critical infrastructure for your business has to have MFA turned on. And that very much includes backups of your systems. And we're going to dig deep into that in a little bit. So the answer is if you have a username and password to something, you should also have MFA turned on for that service. And while not all technology third parties are hip to what's happening, they're getting it real quick and they're starting to enable that functionality immediately. Let me just give you a quick example from the news this week, just so that you guys understand. I don't know if anybody has seen the news about what's going on at Microsoft this week, but a massive security vulnerability was found in a printer tool on the Windows platform. Any one of you out there who is currently watching this webinar in front of a PC of any kind that runs Windows, and you have not updated your software this week, I want you all to sit there, write yourself a note right now so you don't forget, and promise me that you will go and fix and update your Windows software as soon as we get off this call. The vulnerability is known and it has been fixed, but if you don't update your software, the fix isn't going to be on your particular device, and any bad actor who wants to could get in. And so these things are real and they're happening all the time. And we'll talk more about that later, but that's my one PSA for today. If you're currently sitting in front of a PC, update your Windows as soon as we get off this call.
Awesome. Great.
A little bit on your Friday afternoon. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. So let's talk about a few more resources. Ellie, are there any applications that we recommend insureds use or require them to use?
Good question. We do not. All of the apps that you see on the left side of your list, and it is by no means an exhaustive list, are perfectly reasonable functional things. The reason why we want to show you what their names are is because if you have a customer come to you and say, well, we use Authy or we used, Duo Security, Google Authenticator, which is very common, then you can recognize that that is a third-party provider for MFA, and thus they probably have MFA turned on, and that's a net positive. We don't really have a horse in the race of which one you use. They're all good and they all function the same way. Now, we do, however, have some tips. Now, I've just told you about updating your computer with recommended software security updates. If you've ever joined one of our webinars before, you know how important I think this is, and really just in general, how vital it is to the security of your business, this one small step. However, there are a few other things that you can do to keep yourself secure and help your clients stay secure. Passwords, as we've already talked about, are not that fun anymore. So many of them have been leaked, and it's so hard to track that difficult passwords are helpful, but obviously if we need MFA, by no means the be all and end all. That being said, you should be changing them regularly and you should be using different passwords for different services. Now, in order to keep up with all of this and keep track of it, we recommend a password manager. They are free or nearly free, and they are fantastic. I personally use LastPass. Maddie uses 1Password. They're both great. They do a number of excellent functions. They keep track of each of your passwords for each of your services across all devices. They are going to recommend complicated, hard to guess, or unable to guess passwords. They're going to let you know if a password that you're using has been found in a data breach, which is fantastic. And they'll keep track of everything personal and business-wise. And so we do recommend you to do that.
Great. Before we move on to backups, does anyone have any questions on multi-factor authentication? How to use it, what it is, what apps to use, anything?
Maddie, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
I'm kind of looking at this as somebody who's gone out and sold this, and especially around MFA here, we often get the questions from clients about, okay, well, now we got to do all this multi-factor thing. We got to, do all this. I don't have people to do that. I don't have time. We don't have enough resources to do it. What's the best recommendation you give to all the producers that are on right now on how to overcome that that pushback?
Man, that's a great question, Joe. We also get a lot of, I don't need this. I don't have any critical data, which of course is untrue. At a bare minimum, you need MFA for Microsoft 365, and everybody has that because they have Word, have Outlook on their computers. Now, with regards to resources, this MFA is not expensive. It's usually free for any third-party software that you're using. It's about $1.99 a user for any proprietary software your customer might be using, meaning they built it themselves. So it's not particularly expensive. Now, the expertise to get it done isn't particularly high either for third parties. You can call your IT guy. We have some marketing materials, like a one sheet, if you will, on how to turn it on for 365, and also, just a little slip to give to your IT person to help them realize which services really need MFA. We also work with a third-party technology company that we can refer your clients to, that will essentially quarterback that process with their IT team and or outside IT services provider and the company itself for like not that much money to make sure that they're fully covered. It's a great question, and we do have resources available to all of you if you want them. We find that that's important.
Absolutely. Really great question. All right, so let's switch gears here. Ellie, what are backups and why do insureds need them?
So backups are fantastic. They are a snapshot in time of your computer system stored somewhere else. Now, that sounds a lot easier than MFA. It sounds much less complicated. And to a certain extent, it is. And the importance of them and why you need them is relatively straightforward. If for whatever reason, and by the way, cyber attack is only one of the reasons a backup is important. Data loss and data corruption, software failures, things like that happen every day. Whether or not cyber breach is to blame for that, and you will lose access to that, or you just lose your data. And having a good backup will allow you to get back to what you were doing very, very quickly. If you don't have a backup and that happens, really no way. I mean, some companies will be like, well, recreate your data, but that's complicated, time consuming, and incredibly expensive if they can do it at all. So having a backup becomes vital. And backups can come in a lot of different forms. We're going to talk about what constitutes a backup in a second, but just know that the most overlooked areas of backups are the documents on your computer and the emails in your email. And so something as simple as that also needs to be backed up, because if you don't have it somewhere readily available outside of the device you're sitting in front of right now, and something should happen to that device, you'll never see that data again. And so we want to make sure that when we talk about backups, we're talking about all different kinds of data that need to be backed up and how to do it.
Ellie, do you mind if I interject quickly? We do have a question. It's from Eric. He says, why does our system require MFA to access the system when outside of the office, but not when inside of the office?
Oh my gosh, great question, Eric. Okay, so imagine, again, we're using our house as an example. When you're inside of the house, the computer knows you're inside of the house and thus knows that it has to be you. If someone physically breaks into your office space and gets onto your computers, sadly, not much I can do about that. However, when you're outside of the house trying to look inside the house, it can sense that you're outside trying to get in. And that's when it asks to make sure that it's you. And so typically speaking, if you have an iPad not connected to the internet that you create invoices on, for example, does that necessarily need MFA? Not really. Should you have it anyway, just to be sure? Absolutely. But you're physically inside the house and you're looking at your data, you'd have to physically have the device in your hand in order to gain access to that data. MFA really is for people who are trying to access your data from outside of the house. It's a real 90s scary movie vibe I'm giving off, and that's pretty accurate, unfortunately. So I hope that answers your question, but if not, let me know. All right, let's switch back gears. If you have any more questions about that, shoot them out though, because that was a great question. let's go back to backups. Now, I mentioned that we have sort of 3 separate elements of what actually constitutes a backup. I love this graphic because it really gets to the heart of the things that make a backup good. Number 1, it's a copy of your data. We got that. But then there's 2 other pieces of this that are equally important. That backup has to have 2 things in order to be successful. Number 1, it has to be secure, which ironically enough means password protected and MFA turned on. And number 2, it needs to be in a separate location. So much like Eric's thing, if your backup is sitting on the same device as your actual files, it's of no use, because if that device gets corrupted somehow, then both your primary data source and your backup are lost. Similarly, if a ransomware attack hits your system and your backup is also connected to your system, then it's going to affect your backup as well. So you need the backup to be secure, and you need it to be separate. So not on the same drive as the other. Cloud is fine. Separate device is fine. We'll talk more about that in a second. But it needs to be separate. It needs to be secure.
Great, Ellie. In the same vein, about the different applications you can use for multi-factor authentication, let's talk about a really popular backup option, OneDrive.
Yeah, so we've all sort of skirted around the concept of Microsoft 365 today. I mean, it is synonymous with business at this point. And there's a lot of facets of it that people don't realize are included that can dramatically help your business grow and be sustainable. One of those is OneDrive. We mentioned earlier, emails and documents and things like that are one of the things that people forget to back up, and that's totally fair. I personally am on a Mac, and so it automatically backs up everything in my computer, and I have it to 2 separate locations, but to the cloud. A PC can do that as well. If you set up a folder in OneDrive and you create a rule that says any document you create on your desktop, a copy of it all goes into OneDrive. It's incredibly simple to set up. It takes less than 2 minutes. There are instructional videos all over the internet on setting up OneDrive for your business and for yourself personally. And because it is already included in your 365, it is a high recommend from us. It is by no means the only way to do backups, and it is certainly easiest for only a certain set of your computer, but regardless, doesn't matter. It is there, it is available, and it's great. We can talk ad nauseum about this later, or we can send you some additional information.
All right, Ellie, do we recommend any specific application for backups? I know we chatted about OneDrive. Tell us a little bit about some of the other ones, and let's also talk about some other security measures for backups as well.
Absolutely. Much like with MFA, there are 1,001 different vendors that you can use for backups, and all of them are fantastic. I put this list on the left-hand side. Again, it's a recognition list. If you have a customer that uses one of these, great. That's one less thing you need to think about. If they say I use Carbonite, we know that they're talking about backups. That being said, we use iDrive and Dropbox and a litany of other things, because I sell cyber insurance for a living, which is making me into a doomsday prepper. But all other things aside, any of these are great and they're fantastic. Now, we do tend to get some follow-up questions about the security and safety aspect of backups. Number 1, we get asked a lot, does it matter if the backups are offline or online? Now, here's what I mean by that. Offline backups are physical drive, often stored in like a fireproof safe, and online backups are usually what people refer to as backing up in the cloud. I'm using air quotes that you can't see. Which should you use, or both? Which is better? There is no better. They both have pros and cons. Offline backups, as you would imagine, are safer because you have to physically have the drive in order to access the data. However, the con to an offline backup is that you have to physically have the drive and plug it in to actually get the data backed up, which means your system might not be as frequently backed up as if it was an online backup. Online backups, you can sort of set and forget. You can have it be update, making a copy of your system every couple of hours, every day, every week, whatever, and you don't really need to think about it. Now, the con to that is if you do not have MFA turned on for your backups, it's about as secure as, an open car door in downtown San Francisco, where I live. So I would say pros and cons to both. Can you use both? Yes. Do you have to? No, but it is a very viable way to go, and just to make sure that no matter what happens to a business, you're going to have your data. Now, we've talked about credentials and how important it is to have different credentials with regards to MFA. It is doubly so for backups, separate access credentials, MFA turned on for backups, really important. Don't forget to test backups. They're not unfallible. And so if you are relying this heavily on something, make sure every couple of months or every 6 months, once a year, your IT person is setting up from your backups to make sure that that's feasible and all of the data that you need is there. And then keep your backups up to date, regardless of which method you use. That's the most important thing. So I hope that was helpful on the backups front, because backups are a relatively simple concept, but the more you think about it, just a few little things can make them go from a little thing to really important for the longevity of your business.
So Ellie, a lot of agents have seen our new revamped full cyber application as shown on the right there. And to be honest, some of the questions on there are not self-explanatory. There are a few terms that I'm not familiar with, and maybe some clients aren't familiar with either. Would you mind going through a few of them for us?
Absolutely. Again, our goal here is really to make sure that as you're filling out applications, whether it be ours or somebody else's, that you're able to at least be able to field the questions that your customer is asking. And so here are some very common things on cyber applications today that you might want a little more information on. Role-based training is sort of a hit or miss thing, but basically that's the idea that it's important to keep data siloed. For example, a CSR in your office should not have access to the accounting department's data. Why? There's no reason for them to have access to it. And if somebody should be able to get into at the CSR level, they shouldn't have global access at the accounting level. That's role-based training. We've already talked about RDP, or remote desktop protocol, and what that means, and sort of how that's sort of the roof of the house, if you will. And I just want to make sure that everybody's clear on that, because a lot of insurance companies are sticklers. If you have RDP, you have to have MFA. That's a lot of acronyms in one sentence outside of the federal government. And so I just wanted to make sure that everybody's clear that that's what that is and what they're actually asking about there. Next up are sort of two things that go hand in hand. The first one is something called endpoint detection and response solutions. Now, that's a fancy way of saying it's a third-party software that you add to your servers to detect and respond in the event of somebody trying to get in. Now, there are specific companies that are well known for this. Carbon Black Cloud and Microsoft Defender are two of them. Your clients might be using something else, and they're usually listed on the application. So if you answer yes to endpoint detection and response solution, they want to know which one of the service providers they're actually using. That should help them answer actually the first question. They'll know if they use something called Carbon Black Cloud or Windows Defender or any of the others. So that's what you need to know about that one. The other thing we get asked a lot about is again, as we go down the acronym highway here, there are three things that are popping up on all different kinds of applications, and they are SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, and they are all talked about as if they are vital and important. Now, you don't need to be experts in any of this stuff. Here's what you need to know. Each one of these softwares does something different in the security of email specifically. When filling out the application, you can explain what each of these things is to your customer. You can easier tell them to ask their IT provider which of these services, if any, they use. But the important thing to know is it is not, unlike the endpoint detection situation, which was you use one of these services. it is more of a menu and you can have all of them. Most frequently, if you have one, you have all, but not necessarily. And so don't get confused if somebody comes back to you with an application and has all three of these clicked. They're not lying necessarily. These all do something different, and they work together holistically to make email more secure. Questions on this stuff? All right, well, now's the time for you to toss all of your questions out to us, to Joe about the program, to us about anything that we've talked about today. We have some upcoming webinars for you guys to know about. Joe is putting on another one of these webinars that is going to be with us in about a month, so stay tuned for that. Joe, do you have anything you want to say while people type in their questions?
Well, I think you guys have done a great job. It's, it's a complicated, it's a complicated topic for a lot of producers, but and actually those that are doing it every day. But it's just an awareness. We need to be aware of some of these things. And you mentioned the next webinar. We're going to do these all. This is your program. I'm talking to the producers out there, and this is your program. I helped build this. We screened companies. I've been doing this for 19 years, so we know the different products that are out there. These ladies are staying on top of it as well. So, but the next webinar we're going to do, I encourage you guys to have all your producers try to be on it. We're going to tell them how to sell cyber. We're going to help them with that area. So that's going to be a big one. With that said, I think there were a couple questions that came through. And I guess you've already answered them.
Well,
so
the primary question was, can we get copies of the presentation? Absolutely. Joe will have the link for this webinar and the slides that everyone is welcome to use however they want.
Yeah.
We can, we can always provide that. They also asked about any program specific information. Joe, what's your URL for them to get more information from you on the program specifically?
Sure. Actually, you could just go to our website, which is Leavitt/ComTech or /ComTech. Go into our Cyber Center button. That'll take you to the Cyber Center where you can actually get quotes online for this program. On there, there's some information available to you right there. But as far as going back to the presentation or anything you're looking for, we have those materials. Just drop me an email, say, hey, I'd like a copy of the presentation. I had a couple owners sent me a note before, hey, I'm not going to be able to be on. Can you make sure I get a copy? So we're going to record all these for you. And so, yeah, just about anything you need as far as copies of what's included in the program, what's our coverages, we have it all. Drop me a note. Be glad to share it with you.
Ditto goes for us. I just put Joe's email address in the chat if anybody wants to grab it. And we are happy to answer your questions offline as well. If you have insured specific ones, we go through Joe or just email us at info@wingmanins, and we'll be happy to answer anything that comes up.
Yeah, one of the things I'll mention on some of the marketing materials, we are trying to get those converted into the Leavitt branding style with the orange and the dark blue colors, so it looks like a Leavitt product. So that and it's not just, it's branded for Leavitt. It's not for ComTech at all. But so you'll see some of those as we get them. We'll put them out that way, and that way you can share them with your clients, and they won't ask a lot of extra additional questions.
That's a good idea. And if anybody needs anything specifically, don't hesitate to ask for it. We love making content. So we hope to see you all next month for our next in the series of cyber related webinars. I believe next month is our top 5 tips to actually close the sale. We're going to talk a lot about storytelling with regards to cyber, and we'll keep you guys up to date. you all for joining us. Joe, thank you again for having us. It's been a real pleasure. Happy Friday, everybody.
Yep. Have a good weekend.